Hi, this is Craig. Thank you very much for purchasing SenSys. You should have received in your kit a number of these SenSys tags. You might have bought 3 or 5 or maybe even individual tags. We'll get into how to charge these and turning them on and off in just a few minutes. You'll also probably have some charging equipment with it. This is going to change over time, so it's not going to look exactly like this, but these do charge using a USB cable, and I'll show you that later as well. I want to give you some general information about the tags. These are specially designed tags that measure the presence and the removal of ungaffed objects. And it does that by measuring the capacitance, essentially, of an object. So things that you can use and sense is almost anything. It's almost limitless, but you certainly can detect something like a cell phone. This is a very large object. There's metal in it, so it's a very capacitive object. It's something that's super simple to actually detect something this large. You can detect a wallet. So it doesn't have to have anything in the wallet in particular, but something of just the leather itself and something of this size is going to be simple to detect. You can detect a coin. It could be even a penny, nickel, dime. This is a $50. Does not have to be magnetic at all, but just the presence of the metal here allows this to be easily detected. You certainly can do something like a Sharpie. You'll want to be careful using objects that are round that can roll because they can roll off of the sensors. And you can even use things like a single playing card. It can actually detect this. It's surprising actually how much capacitance there is in a playing card, more than what you'll find even in a business card. So sometimes while a playing card might work, you might find a business card or a billet will not work. So you need to do some testing to make sure. Also, taking even like a bill from a wallet can work if maybe you put a paper clip around it. I've done that. The metal in the paper clip makes it much more capacitive and it's much easier to detect. Now this tag itself has 2 sides to it. There's the side with the 3D printed enclosure on it, and then there's the smooth side here. The smooth side is a little bit more sensitive than this other side, but it is actually detecting from both sides, and it's detecting a bit out in a circle as well. So not very far, but more of like a cylinder that comes above it. And essentially when an object gets set above it, and if you do it more in the center, you're going to get a better response than if you're off to a side. But if you do it in the center, it's going to detect the presence of this, and then of course when you remove it, it'll detect the removal of it. Now, one way to use this is to put it underneath a table. And if you do that, you want to use a fairly thin table if you can. I use this table that I get on Amazon by a company called Pyle, P-Y-L-E. It's a very common table. They're very strong. It's a laptop table essentially, and it's made of plastic, which is nice for this. A lot of people have asked about using in-stand tables. Now in-stands are very lightweight, but there's an aluminum top. You can use that, but if you put this tag underneath the aluminum top, the aluminum provides a lot of capacitance for this thing. So it's not going to be able to detect the differences of a pen going on and off. It's not going to notice a difference. It's just detecting the aluminum table that it's underneath. So in order, if you want to use an in-stand table or a metal table, you're better off putting the tag above the table. Now ways that you can do that, you could gaff it into a close-up pad. So by taking a close-up pad and cutting circles with it, that will work. And you can also gaff it into a notebook. There's actually several people doing this, notebooks and art pads that they carry. And by opening it up, you can put them inside the cover. A lot of times there's a flap that holds papers inside of a cover of a notepad, and people are taking these things and they're putting them inside of that notepad and gaffing them in there, or they could be gaffed inside of more like a spiral bound notepad that you would write on, and you would have to cut some circles in there. These are about 1.5 inches in diameter, so that's another method that you can use. Now in order to adhere these to your table, I'm going to use blue tack to do it. You can use double-sided tape. One thing that you want to make sure is that when you adhere it, like if you just put a single dot here in the middle and you stick this underneath your table, this has the ability to rock back and forth a little bit under the table. That rocking back and forth, it gets it closer and further away from the table. That can cause a false read if you bump the table. So you want this securely mounted, so I would use 2 pieces, and you want to get it fairly close. So you want to squish that down very close. So don't use really large pieces that keeps it, you know, a tenth of an inch away from the table. Use small pieces and squish them down, and use 2, or you could even use 4. That way this will not rock, maybe even 3 like a tripod. And then they are stuck under the table. Now, I like to place them in places where I know where they're going to be. So the corners of the table are good for 2 of them. You can have 1 in the middle if you're just using 3. And don't be afraid to use 4 corners of the table as well. So it depends on how you want to have your display of items after you've collected them. So of course you can provide the objects, or you can have the objects borrowed from the audience. And of course anything that's used you can actually, you know, hand out and give away, because these are going to be ungaffed items. You could use, we'll go over a list of items that you can use, like billiard balls and marbles, and there's any number of things you can think of you can use in your object test. So that kind of gives you a general overview of it, and I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to show you how to turn these on and off and how to charge them, and then we'll show you how to mount them underneath the table. Okay, let's show you how to turn the tag on. This is tag number 1. We've written it with Sharpie right on top of the little USB port there. So there's a little 1 written there, and there'll be 2, 3, 4, and 5. On the back side, you'll notice there's a small little tombstone there, and that's for turning it on so you know where to press. I'm going to turn my receiver on. This is tag number 1. In order to do that, we have to press down here, and you'll feel a little bit of a click, and then you release. And you'll see the little light turn on, and it'll keep signaling you as that light's on. When as it adjusts to its environment, the light turns off. I'm not sure you can quite see it from that angle, but you'll be able to see it from the top of this. And when something goes over the top of it, you'll see the 1, and you'll see that light go off as it averages us out. And then as an object gets removed from it, you'll see it giving the repeats on removal. Now, in order to turn this off, you press and hold this. Now, again, you want your thumb to the kind of to the right side of this. You don't want it over here. There's nothing to press here. You want to be pressing here on this side. So press down. You'll feel a click. There it is. I'm going to hold for 4 seconds. 2, 3, and you'll see the light go off, and then just release. And you'll see the light's completely off. No signals from this tag. So now it's completely done. Now, in order to charge this, this tag is actually already fully charged up, so I'm going to look for a tag that's not charged up. I think my number 4 tag, which is this one, is not fully charged right now. When you plug this in, you're going to see a red light go on. I think we can see it there. That's the charging indicator, and this is going to charge in about 2 hours of time. The light goes off, and then you can remove it. If you leave this on, it does go into like a trickle charge mode, and over time it might actually start flashing that red light. You don't want to leave it in trickle charge mode. You don't want to leave it like that. You just want it to turn off, and then, you know, if you do it, it's not going to cause any major damage. It's just nothing that you want to do, you know, for long periods of time. It doesn't help anything out, and it's not great for the system, so you're better off disconnecting them when they're fully charged. Now, if you have a tag, this is tag number 1, that is fully charged, and you plug it in, you will not get a red light. So here we are not getting a red light, and this tag is actually fully charged. Now, there are ways to charge multiple tags at the same time, and I'm just going to show you right now. This is a cable that is a 1 to 3 cable. These take very, very little amount of power to charge them, so you're not going to damage your USB wherever. If you plug this into a PC or a wall socket or something like that, having multiple charging circuits on here is not going to damage this, because it uses such little power. Even charging all 5 tags at one time is less power than even charging your cell phone. So 2 of these cables, I got this on Amazon. This could be used to charge up 5 discs simultaneously, because you're not going to probably want to charge them one at a time. They also sell something like this, and this is a little charging base, and they even sell these little adapters. Now, these adapters convert micro B to this type of USB, which I believe they call type A. So this is the micro B, which is the thin one that you see on Android devices. This could plug into there, and then this can actually plug into something like this, and you can do multiple tags at the same time. So it could hold 5 or 6 tags, and then this gets plugged into a supply a USB supply, then all of them will charge and you could see the light. We're trying to get something made like this for charging all 5 tags. Your kit may have something like this in it. May not be exactly like this, but this is also stuff that you can buy on Amazon to charge multiple tags at the same time. So that covers the charging of the tags, and that covers turning the tags on and off. No special really way to store these. You can just store them in a pile like this. It doesn't damage them. They can be stored next to magnets. That doesn't damage them either. So those are the tags, and that's how you charge them and turn them on and off. All right, now I have 4 very small dabs of blue tack on the bottom of this tag. I'm going to flatten those out just a bit with my hand, and we will go ahead and just turn this tag on with a single click like we showed you. And I'm going to go ahead and just fasten this underneath the corner of this table. Now it feels nice and flat on there, it feels secure, and it's not rocking or anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and turn on this receiver, and I'm going to have someone hand me a box if I could so that we can hear this. And while we do that, we're going to go ahead and test a couple of objects. I'm going to start with a phone, and then what we'll do is we'll move on to, great, thanks a lot. I'm going to take my receiver and put it on top of the table there. This guy is on underneath there so we can tell there's a single one. This is the number 1 tag, and I'll remove my hand. It's going to give repeats. There it goes right now. So let's try something like a phone. So this is giving a single buzz when it goes on. If the phone gets removed, you're going to get multiple buzzes. And if the phone goes back on, not every time, there's a lot going on, there's a lot of software going on, but most of the time it's going to stop if the object goes back on that spot. So if somebody were to lift it off and set it back down, it should almost every single time stop. Now, the number of repeats it's going to give is actually dependent on some settings. It's not a constant. And in order to get this thing to work as well as it does, this is something that we had to do. We couldn't make it give a constant number of repeats. And it's actually kind of for your own benefit, because I have tried it with the constant repeats and a few other things. And unfortunately, if the table gets bumped or something, or you have something that goes off, you can have a lot of false signals going on. It's really better to allow it just to manage itself. But there are times when you're just going to get a single buzz. I found out that it's very performable that way because I tend to pay much more attention to what's going on. Now, I will say that the larger the object is, the more buzzes you're going to receive. So see if you can follow me here. I usually put my larger objects on like the number 5 tag. And that's because if I put it on 1, I'm always going to get a number of repeats like 3, and 3 or 4 in that case. Now, if the card isn't a big mass, and when I remove it, what it's doing is kind of averaging and doing a bunch of mathematical things, and the 1 buzz is quicker. So it's like 1, 1, 1. So if you use a smaller object on the lower numbers, you're more likely to get a couple of repeats. So I'm going to place the card on there right now. You'll see that you got a single buzz. And when this card gets removed, you'll see in that case we're getting 3 buzzes, 4 buzzes. So we got quite a few on just the card removal. Now let's try a pen. There's something like a pen, and when that gets removed, we got a single buzz on that one. Now, I do want to do something like, this is a coin, of course. I want to show you that effect right there. So let's put the coin down, and you'll see it's a single buzz. Now, when I reach to grab it, it's actually detecting my hand originally. So you can use really small objects, like even just a small piece of paper. It detects my hand, and then when my hand gets removed away, then I'm getting the removal buzzes. You'll notice the single buzz when I pick it up. There'll be a bit of a gap, and then you'll hear a couple of removal buzzes. So when I pick this up, there's 1, waits a little bit, and then we're getting 3 buzzes afterwards. So that was my hand effect, and then being removal. That's a lot of the math kind of things that are going on with this tag that you don't really need to worry about, but just understand that if you get the single and then there's a gap in the rest, you're getting a hand effect. I'll show you the same example with a very, very small piece of paper. I'll put this on there. Now, we didn't get a buzz when that actually went down, right? And it's not going to be able to detect that small of a piece of paper. It can't tell the difference in that. But if it's right over the center of the tag, there's no way for anybody to pick this up without having their hand over it. And in that case, you're going to get the buzzing, and it's from their hand picking it up. Now, if you have a super light object that was really tall that they can pick up from up here, you won't get the hand effect. You're simply going to get, you may get nothing in that case. So the only objects you really shouldn't use are super lightweight objects that somebody can pick up from a distance. You can use very small objects, but make sure they have to like touch down where that is so you get that extra hand effect. So there's a number of objects right there. The playing card, the phone, the wallet, that can all be used. And of course, you know, when they pick it up, and you want to have a little bit of a time lag, of course, before you do the next ones, because they don't talk to each other. So you want it to be finished before the next ones go. And you'll see it's pretty well behaved. This is not going off. That's moving around. So, you know, there are situations where things could set that off, but it takes a pretty good jolt, and it's mostly what happened if that tag were loose. Now, as far as placing these tags, the closest I've really ever placed them is like with one tag distance between them. So you can put 5 tags on a surface in the very front of this if you want. And of course, you can space them out anywhere you want, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But you can put 5 across the front of this. As long as you have about 1.5 inches or the width of one tag between the tags, that is enough room between them so they don't interfere. You do need to be careful, though, that if you do this kind of a thing, that you can get your objects down on top of them, and that you try to minimize how the people are going to, spectators, pick up the objects to try to minimize that hand effect. You don't want them coming across. You can see it's well behaved. Like, it's that number 1 is not picking up my hand right there to get to number 2. It's pretty well behaved, but if they come right across it, you could get that signal and they go to this guy to pick it up. Now you can potentially have 2 things going on. So you want to make sure they're not you know, coming across it too much before they go to the next one, if that makes sense. So in this case, I've got about 2 tags width between them, I would say. I always would go in the middle for number 3, and then I would split the difference for the other 2. I'd go to the far corners, basically, in the middle, and then split that distance for the other 2, or I would just move them to a different spot. Okay? So that's how you do the tag placement. Now let's talk about, I'm going to take this off. Let's talk about how you would place this in another. You can see this just pulls off. Now it's hard to pull off. This is not going to fall off on its own. I'm going to turn this tag off so it doesn't go drive us crazy here. There we go. It's turned off now. If I was going to place this into a pad, I would want this smooth surface to be uppermost. And I also want to place this in a pad in a way where it's not going to rattle around, because it moving around and having play in there is what can cause this to give any kind of false signals. Because anything moving above it, and whether that's if you put an object on it and maybe it's in some paper that flexes, that can cause a false signal. So you want this thing to be properly mounted, and you want it to be as secure as you can in whatever you put it in. So some people have recommended putting it into a bowl, putting it into a tray, putting it into a book, putting it into a close-up pad. So there's lots of different ways that you can gaff this, but you want it to be secure. Let's go over another one of the features with this thing that's interesting. This is actually set up so that it adapts to its environment. So it's specifically set up where you can have these in a tray. So let's say that we have a tray like this, and we have the tray out and we're holding on to it. Of course, this would probably be much thinner. You can go and you can accept object or take objects and put it onto the tray. And you're going to get a signal as that's happening from each of these as it goes down. Now, if you bring this tray over, and let's say this is much flatter, and you set it down on a table, you've now brought the table next to the tags. That's a whole new environment. So they're all going to signal at that point. When you put those things down, they're all going to start signaling at that point. And you're going to have to wait for that to settle down. It's only going to take a few seconds, though, for that to happen, but they're all going to calm down and settle. From that point forward, it's now readjusted to that environment. And then if an object is lifted off of that tray, you're going to get the signal from that. The other thing is to keep aware, like if you have a tray and you have it sitting on a table like this, if you were to lift it off the table, now you're suddenly lifting all 5 tags away from an object, which is this table. They're all 5 going to signal when that happens. And then they're going to adjust to the new environment. So they're very usable in a performance environment in that you can collect, you can have them in something, it can move around, you can collect objects, you can bring it back, you can set it down. You don't have to set or reset anything. But you want the environment to be stable, at least for a few seconds till the buzzing stops, before you start having objects picked up and selected by a spectator. So you just have to kind of keep that in mind, that you want more of a stable environment before the objects are selected so that you can track them. But feel free to put it into other things like notebooks and trays and things. But just keep in mind how you structure your routine so that you keep it stable. So you can see there's 3 pieces of blue tack on this. They're a little bigger than I would normally use actually, but I wanted you to be able to see it on the camera. And this just goes underneath the table, and you can put some pressure, you know, all around this, not have any issues. And yeah, that's nice and firmly attached. You can also turn it on and off while it's under here by pressing and holding that, or pressing that button and clicking it. When you turn it on, you just press it for a moment. Turning it off, you need to press it for 4 seconds until the light goes off. If you're concerned about people seeing this, you can always drape a little cloth over your table if you'd like to, and that would prevent anybody from having any type of angle from seeing this. And it doesn't take much of a cloth, even just 6 inches or so hanging over your table, and that's not going to affect its ability to detect objects on top of it either. So that's a way that you can hide that if you want to. Now let's talk about the types of routines that you can do and the types of objects that you can use. I think the most common use for this is going to be along the lines of an object test, where you just need to know when certain objects are selected. And that could actually be in a book test. There's a lot of people that want to have multiple books on a table and not want to know what book is chosen, and then go about doing a book test. So that's certainly something you can do. It'll easily detect one of a number of books. There's also billiard balls. Colored billiard balls are very popular. And if you're going to use a billiard ball, I recommend using something like a little stand. This is kind of a plastic washer that I found at a hardware store. And this allows it to be sitting on the table. Of course, when you put this on the table, it's going to adjust to the table and to this washer. So when you put the billiard ball on top of it, it'll recognize the ball. When the ball gets removed, you'll know which ball gets removed, 1 through 5 if you're using 5 balls. Of course, the type of routine is usually kind of like a Visa Cabaret routine, where you're telling them which pockets to put it into, and at the very end you have some sort of a prediction, or you go about telling them the colors of the billiard balls that are inside of their pockets. So that can be done. You can also use spray cans for doing a color match routine, similar to our color match Picasso routine, where you have them select a spray can, paint something on a wall, and discard it, and then you would have multiple spray paint cans sitting out on a table that they can select from. You, of course, would know which cans got taken off of the table. Cans don't have to be gaffed, so that works very well. Along the lines of the billiard balls, you could also do much smaller marbles. Of course, they would have to be spread out. Person would come up, however, and they would grab an object, and which would be a marble. And then you could go about with, say, 5 people on stage. You could go about telling each person what color marble that they have in their hand. You can also do things like pieces of candy or things that you might eat. So this would be kind of a PK taste routine. And it can easily detect a piece of candy being lifted off of the table, and maybe you have a selection of small bite-sized candies that, of course, they're already wrapped, so there's no worry about them being, contaminated or in any way, and people usually don't have fear of that. They can take the piece of candy, they can taste it, you could tell them what piece of candy they tasted, maybe tell them their favorite candy. People have always asked about using things like ring boxes. You could easily put out 3 or 4 or 5 ring boxes if you want the object, maybe an object to be hidden, have them take a ring box, and then they could go about opening the ring box, and you would know what object they were looking at, and the objects could be hidden. So there could be a number of ring boxes on a table and a number of spectators that each take one. Also, things like postcards can be used. So maybe they lift it up and they're thinking of a particular city, famous city in the world, like Paris or whatever, and you might go about doing a drawing duplication of the Eiffel Tower. So something like a postcard would be good. If you decide to use envelopes, you can do that. These can be a little tricky to actually sense this because it is quite small. You may need to gaff this with a little bit of aluminum foil or put a paper clip around it. A single paper clip on this makes it way more detectable than just this by itself. I know it can do a playing card, but there's some properties in playing cards that make them very detectable. This can be a little bit more difficult, but with the right billet in it, or even a paper clip around a billet inside the envelope, makes it very detectable. There could be some change in there too. There could be some coins in these, so you might do some sort of an exact change kind of a prediction. You can also do something like a murder plot. So there might be murder weapons up here. So that's another type of like object test that you might do. Somebody might grab the knife or the gun or something along those lines. But those things are things that can sit on your table that are easily detected as well. What else do I have here? Oh, I have psychometry. Kind of an interesting idea is to have borrowed objects from the audience. They can go inside of little bags, and they can be set on the table, and where the object came from. With your back turned or blindfolded, you could have somebody come up and select an object and simply feel the object, maybe describe it without telling you what it is, and then you go about telling them who that object belongs to in the audience. And that's something you can do just by knowing the position, and you don't even have to know what object was selected. Of course, doing object tests with borrowed objects from the audience, I think, is going to be very popular. You can always have a prediction about where those objects get placed on a particular person. And the objects, as long as if you borrow the same objects, I mean, you're always going to be able to get a wallet, you're going to be able to get a cell phone, you're probably going to be able to get a pen from somebody. You could get car keys, although they make a little noise, but maybe a single key from somebody, maybe a coin from somebody, or even a bill that you put a paper clip around, which of course, once you've done that, you can switch that bill out and maybe do a serial number divination. But there's objects you can always get from the audience, and as long as you memorize, where you put them, it doesn't matter at any show. You can just grab an object, place it on your table, have somebody come up and take the objects off the table, and maybe put them in their pockets, and you'll know exactly where those objects are going. So that's another thing that you can do with it. I'm sure you'll have a million different ideas. There's one other idea I wanted to share with you, and I think I have this in the Evolution. In fact, I know I have it in the Evolution DVD as well, that I think is interesting. And I haven't done it, but I do think it's an interesting concept, and that is to take these and maybe have like a map on the wall. And on this map, you might have different countries. And under the countries, you have these discs and on the pad of paper, and you have somebody perhaps put their finger on a country that they might want to start in, and then trace their finger across the map to a destination country that they want to go to. And not even using a pen, just using their finger and using their imagination. They could simply trace it over, and they could be on that destination, and you would know where they started from the buzzing, and you would of course know where their destination was because of the buzzing when they got there. Then they could leave that country and maybe go to a third place, and maybe so it's a trip around the world or something like that. But I think it's a neat concept that people could play around with. So there's a lot of things you can do with this. I'm sure you'll use your imagination. I'm sure if you're buying this, you probably already have an idea in mind of what you're going to do. But again, I think the most popular thing is going to be to have a prediction written out of borrowed objects, and where in what pockets they're going to be placed. It's a very powerful routine to have somebody come up and select objects. You tell them where to put them, and of course you have a prediction. Maybe it's inside of a wallet or inside of one of the pieces that's on the table, kind of a free will kind of a thing, and they read that, and then it tells them where all the objects are. So I hope you enjoy, and please share any ideas that you have as well. Well, thank you very much for buying SenSys. I hope you get a lot of great use out of it. It seems like everybody has a need to know when an ungaffed object is selected in their show, one way or another. So I hope you have a great use out of it. Thanks.